After leaving the boat in Hartlepool for a week to wait for strong northerly winds to subside, we returned for a second attempt to make progress north. The forecast when we decided to return was for at least a week of southerly winds. By the time we were back in Hartlepool, that had changed to 3 or 4 days of light cyclonic winds, but possibly northeasterly 3 or 4 on the second day, with the possibility of more northerly winds fairly soon. We decided to make as much progress as possible as soon as we could. Ideally, we wanted to reach Peterhead as a first stop, but that was 170 miles, and if the wind turns northeasterly by the end of the day, we would consider stopping at Eyemouth. With that in mind, we stayed as close inshore for the first part of the journey until we reached the Farne Islands. The North Northumberland Heritage Coast is well worth seeing, and here Dunstanburgh Castle appears out of the mist. Yeah, here he comes. Oh, no!
He seems to have really swung in.
Yeah. Visibility improved as we approached the Farne Islands, but then the autohelm packed up. Matthew got it going again by poking around in the locker and pushing the connectors together. We hoped that it solved the problem. We opted to head inside the Farne Islands, between Bamburgh Castle and the inner farm, which was pretty scenic.
ARNE.
There were hundreds of visitors on the island, and huge flocks of seabirds feeding in the eddies just offshore.
Right, we just run them over.
There were numerous guillemots around, and we were puzzled as to why they always chose to dive out of our way rather than fly off like most other seabirds. It transpires that from June to August they are undergoing their main annual molt, and may well be flightless. When we were last here, it was a little later in the season, and then the chicks, who were certainly flightless, were accompanied by their fathers. Mothers having lost interest as soon as the chicks took to the sea.
Oh, those are alright.
See one get taken past here.
Oh. Well, that's one guy trying to take off. Obviously good fishing in all these swirls.
They're all going to die.
We've lost it again. At this point the boat lurched violently to the port as the autohelm failed again. We occasionally managed to get it working for a few minutes, but essentially for the rest of the trip we had to steer manually. These seals have found a new use for navigation buoys. At first all three were lying on board, but as we approached, two of them dived off. The third one just wasn't interested in us. Having passed Lindisfarne Castle on Holy Island, we headed straight for Peterhead. That meant a cold, wet night, hand steering through the mist, 2 hours on, 2 hours off. Just before it went dark, there was a loud bang and then a grinding sound. I thought we'd run aground, but then a large log appeared astern. For log, read something the size of a telegraph pole. Fortunately there was no damage, so we could carry on. The last time we passed this way we were going in the other direction, and the entrance was so busy we'd given it a miss. Today it was still busy, but harbour control let us straight in, just told us not to dawdle. Total passage time from Hartlepool was 31 hours. Having motored for so long, we needed to fill up with diesel, but the refuelling jetty was just the other side of the crane, so we had to wait for the shipping movements to calm down before we were allowed to move. Whilst waiting for permission to refuel, Matthew took the opportunity to fit his new plotter. Perhaps just in time, as the old one seemed to be affected by the autohelm problems. The ship's head was showing at 90 degrees to the track, and on our trip to the refuelling jetty it showed us sailing happily over the marina wall. Matthew had calculated that we should leave at 6 the next day. However, two German crews heading in the same direction as us told him they had planned to leave at 8, so he decided to do the same. Bad idea. We ran aground again. However, this time it was not unexpected, and we just gently touched on the sand at the entrance and reversed back in. The Germans still thought they could make it and came to a very abrupt halt. Eventually, at 11:46 they tried again and managed to squeeze out. We left it another 15 minutes.
You asked them to give us a depth over the shallow bit, Peter?
No, I didn't ask.
Could you tell us the depth of the shallow bit? Can we go back for it? Yes. The shallow is 1.6.
A significant downside of this miscalculation was that when we did get out, the tide was running so hard against us that it was difficult to make much progress, and it made it difficult to arrive at any of the future ports while there was still water to get in. Progress around Rattery Head was depressingly slow, with the tide running at about 3 knots. The tide began to ease as we reached Fraserburgh, and from then onwards, through the rest of the Moray Firth until we reached Inverness, tidal streams were fairly mild. We were too late to safely get into Whitehills, which was our original destination, so we carried on to Buckie, as that was an all-tide harbour and we thought we'd be able to make it before dark. We arrived at Buckie at low water, but that wasn't a problem. There was plenty of room, but as the port is still essentially a fishing harbour, we had to moor against a wall. The plank we carried had already done a circumnavigation on my boat without seeing any action. It was finally pressed into service. We managed to moor next to a ladder, so getting ashore wasn't a problem. except someone had painted this red handle just before we got there, and although it felt dry to the touch, we both managed to get paint on our hands and thence onto the boat. We left Buckie at 6:20. The tide outside was still against us, but the stream is weak in the Moray Firth until you get to Fort George and January Point. From there to the bridge you really must have the tide underneath you. There are 4 large basins at Buckie. It's a pity they haven't converted one into a marina. There's plenty of space, and it appears to be the only harbour with all tide access along the coast. Nighttime access might be a bit of a problem, having to avoid all the offlying reefs, but otherwise there's no problem with access. Just to the west of the present harbour, there appears to be a much older, now unused harbour. Lossiemouth had been on our list of potential overnight stops the previous day, but our failure to leave Peterhead on time had put it out of range. Unlike Buckie, Lossiemouth has virtually abandoned its fishing industry and concentrated on leisure facilities. It now has a decent marina. Being ex-Air Force, I was interested to see RAF Lossiemouth, and although we could see the airfield, there was no flying going on at all. I knew the Tornadoes had left in 2014, but I thought they'd been replaced by squadrons of Typhoons. The weather this day was obviously too cloudy for them, or else they're in fuel-saving mode. Having passed Berg Head, we came to the entrance to Findhorn Bay. Although we could see the mass of yachts in the pool, the entrance over the bar was not at all obvious to the naked eye. Just to the left of the bay is what was RAF Kinloss, where the Nimrods were based. It's now home to the Royal Engineers.
We're just coming up to Inverness for 2 o'clock.
As we approached Inverness, Matthew gave Callie a call to see if they could arrange for a technician to come and have a look at the order helm when we were berthed up in the marina. These were pretty impressive standing waves, considering we were coming on the flood, with no wind. Oh, there he is! As we came up to January Point, we saw lots of dolphins in the water feeding, and hordes of people standing on the point watching them. For once we got our timing right, and we still had the last of the tide underneath us to take us through the bridge.
How's pseudo?
The bridge had an advertised minimum clearance of 30 metres, and we only needed 15, well, 16 including the antennae.
Oh, that looks horrible and close, doesn't it?
Oh, geez, that doesn't look like 30 metres clearance to me. Anywhere close to it. When we moored up, I had a double take. I recognised this boat. It was Dylan Winter's old boat, Harmony. He'd sold it to his friend John Root, and the engine had gone bang as they exited the canal. Typical Dylan fashion, he'd had to use an outboard to get it into the marina.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's all the wind instruments.
When the engineers had finished with Harmony, a ruptured muffler, they came to have a look at our autohelm. Off and on, it took 2 days to determine that the fault was probably in the control head. The bad news was that under warranty, it would take at least a fortnight to get a replacement. While Matthew was dealing with this, I went to have a look around at some local bits of much larger scale engineering. With Maureen now not travelling north any time in the near future, and the autohelm out of action, Matthew was in a bit of a pickle. I offered to stay on and help him get the boat through the Caledonian and Crinan canals so that he could base the boat in the Clyde until he decided what he was going to do for cruising plans for this year and the next. So my Scottish adventure was destined to continue a little longer. The next stage was to head for the Caledonian Canal, the entrance of which you can see by the little white cottage on the second promontory.